So before we export, we should change this to the correct size. Obviously we don't want this thing to be 5 meters long in Unreal Engine, so that does need to be corrected. So we do need to get back to, if you've still got the UV editor window in there, you can always just go to Maya Classic on here, press Control Spacebar and that'll get rid of that. So let's create a cube that's going to be the correct size and rescale our final object in relation to that. Obviously, do a bit of reference research. This particular keyboard is 45 by 17 by 2.9 centimeters, so I'll use those figures as a guide. So I'm just going to make a bog standard cube. So my bog standard cube is currently set to 100 centimeters by 100, so it's essentially 1 meter cube. So I know the depth of that is 3 centimeters. I'm just going to press F and just going to go to wireframe, so that's definitely right in terms of 3 centimeters. And then we'll just adjust the width. So the width should be 45 centimeters, and the depth should be 17. So that appears to be correct. So what we'll do now, just go to top view, and I'm just going to press the up arrow key to select the entire group. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to move this to the side, and I'll still hide the grid for the time being. We no longer need that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put, so if I just select the group again, I'm going to press D, and that's going to control the pivot point. So here I can essentially move the pivot point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap the pivot point by pressing V and then dragging along. So V is going to snap to the vert, so it's going to snap to that vert there, and press V, keep hold of it, and snap to that vert there. And then with that snapped, it's simply a matter of pressing D again to get rid of the selection mode or the activation of the pivot point. And I'm just going to press V and then just drag this group to that corner there. And then it's simply a matter of scaling this down so it matches. So just press F. Looks like we just need to scale this up a touch. Like so. That will do. So I'm just going to press V now, scale to the, or snap to the bottom. That will do. Again, we don't need to be absolutely perfect. Now that to me is good enough. You're not going to notice if it's 2-3 centimeters too small. Obviously, if this was something that was going to be a key object and something that was going to be zoomed into and there'd be a cutscene involving the keys, etc., then fair enough, we would need to be extremely accurate with regards to the scale, but for the purpose of this, this is fine. So let's just show our grid back up. And all I'm going to do now is snap this to the grid. So if you press X, and that will allow you to snap to the grid points. So that's now in world 000. Although really you'd want the pivot point to be here and then snap to there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this up a touch and then snap that pivot point. So press D and then X and snap that pivot point to that grid line there, and that will do me. So that's adequate enough in terms of scale. Press Ctrl S to save that again. Triple check before we do any exports to make sure that our UV is indeed correct. Yep, there's nothing changed there. Might as well check now rather than export the thing out and then realize it doesn't work. I'm just press Ctrl S again, save that. So in order to bring this into Substance Painter to create the actual materials and textures, what we need to do is export this out. The export process is very simple. We simply need to go to File, Export Selection, and just on our desktop, I'm just going to put this into our My Projects folder. And I'm just going to make a new folder and call this Exports. And call it Keyboard. And you want smoothing groups and triangulate. And don't bother with anything else, just make sure smoothing groups and triangulate is on, and just literally hit Export Selection. And within a few seconds that should instantaneously do that. That's good. So I'm just going to pause this now and load up Substance Painter. So I've just loaded up Substance Painter. The thing to note is we have an older version of Substance Painter within the Athena Labs. I would recommend at home downloading a free copy of Substance Painter. As a student, you do have access to a free license. You just need to go to the Algorithmic website, complete the necessary details for a free student license, and you should be able to get a download link and a key file or a serial number, and that should allow you to just download the very latest Substance Painter and use that for the purpose of your assessments. The thing to note is, from my understanding, I don't think you'll be able to download the same copy as the ones we have in the Athena. And also to note is, because you potentially will be using a newer version at home, when you save your work, you won't be able to bring it in and load it into the older version of Substance Painter once you get to university. So just bear those two things in mind. Obviously, there's a lot to learn in terms of just learning Maya. There's a substantial amount when it comes to learning Substance Painter and obviously Unreal Engine 4 as well. So this module touches on those at a very basic level, in all honesty. It would be impossible to cover this in a really in-depth situation for two reasons. Primarily, you are designers, so we don't expect you to have a world's greatest understanding of how to go about modeling, and certainly from that perspective, in order to texture correctly, you need a very high resolution asset to work from to bake normal maps and utilize that in terms of world space normals and things like that, and curvature maps, etc. So we're just going to keep things very, very, very simple within this. So initially, when you first load it up, yours could potentially look something along these lines. What I'm going to have to do here is I'm just going to have to jiggery pokery a bit because unfortunately, if I'm just going to do a quick reset of my UI. So you should see something along these lines when you first load it up. So what we're going to have to do is import the asset first and foremost, and I'll talk you through the basic principles of Substance Painter. And I'll also provide some download links in terms of understanding the basics of how this works. But we'll keep it simple for the time being. So we need to go to File, New. In your case, you are always going to be using PBR Metallic Roughness. So just make sure that's set to PBR Metallic Roughness. Normal map should always be DirectX. Document resolution, you can leave that at 1024. You can pump it up to 2048. Makes no difference at this point. If you are using this at home, just bear in mind that ideally you need a 4 GB card to make things relatively usable. Anything less can potentially be quite slow. I mean, it shouldn't be too bad for the purpose of this module, because we are not baking high resolution normal maps. So as a result, we might be able to simplify things. So select our mesh. So we're just going to have to go into our My Projects, and we've exported that out into Keyboard FBX. Just click on Open, click on OK, and then what will happen is we'll end up with our asset in here. So what you need to do at this point, I'm just going to press the bracket key just to decrease the size of that brush. So what I'm doing now is I'm essentially rotating around the 3D viewport, and it's the same operation as in Maya. It's the exact same way as Maya. So essentially, Alt right click will zoom up and down, or just the mouse button will scroll in and out. You've got Alt and left click will pan around it, and Alt combined with the middle mouse button will pan, and left will orbit with the Alt button selected. If you press at this point, you press Shift and the right click, that will move the HDRI image or the lighting. And if yours is relatively black for the time being, you can always just adjust that just to get a better idea of what's going on. So to cut a long story short, once your asset's in there, you're essentially going to download some materials or use the existing materials and just apply them to this particular object. So if I click on materials over here, you've got a whole sequence of materials. Whatever I drag onto this will essentially cover everything. So if I just grab copper, pop that onto there, then suddenly, lo and behold, as if by magic, everything is copper. But before we do that, we do still need some additional maps to be created within here. So this is Substance Painter's way of creating all the maps that we need in order to put into UE4. So the next step is click on Bake Textures, and we want the output size. We'll leave this at 1024 for the time being. Well, to be fair, I'll just ramp it up to 2048. Ultimately, we will change that at some point, purely because of the fact that you are creating a keyboard. A keyboard within a game does not need to be extremely high resolution in terms of texture. It should be low resolution, but we can always do that right at the end. So I will leave it 2048. I'm going to turn off ID map because we haven't set up any IDs. You can leave all the rest for the time being. We're going to say use low poly mesh as the high poly. That's certainly what we want to do because we haven't created our own high poly. We need to click on that to maximize the effects of what Substance Painter can do. Match you don't need to worry about. The rest you don't need to worry about. Anti-aliasing, just turn it on to 4x4. If you suddenly start doing 8x8 very early on, it does slow things down, so bear that in mind. And then just turn on, I'll just put mine back to 4x4. And literally that's all you need to do. It would be slightly different if we had a high resolution mesh to work from, but we don't, so we just need to press those. Make sure that the settings are the same as this, and then just literally just hit bake. Give it a few moments to do its thing. Depending on the complexity of the asset in question, it can either take a few seconds or it can take substantially longer, so it's something to note. Shouldn't take too long. I mean, I've just got a 4GB 970, which is arguably, it's a 3-4 year old card now, but it more than suits my needs. I certainly wouldn't rush out and buy 400 £500 1070 for the purpose of shaving 20 seconds off this. Really, I wouldn't bother. So I'm going to pause it because it can potentially take a couple of minutes. So that's now baked. It took a couple of minutes. It wasn't too bad, to be fair. So if we look at this now that it's finished, you can see that it's produced a reasonable job. So there's like soft shadows on there, which is called ambient occlusion, and ultimately now the materials have been set up within this section over here. So when we start applying materials onto this object, it will take into account the curvature and the ambient occlusion when we start applying complex operations. Obviously, black plastic is what this is going to end up being, I suppose. But let's have a tinker with see what's what. So if we just drag in on here, this is called the materials. If you just click on that, you can select the materials. So there's lots and lots of different options in here. Again, I'll send you links with regards to Substance Painter, how to learn it via some tutorials. I'm just going to literally drag on brass, and then lo and behold, as if by magic, our object is now brass. Again, you can layer all these up and just keep adding different types of materials on there. So if you want it to be mega shiny, there's some shiny iron on there. You can just press delete on those. So you've got plastic matte, which is more likely what this is going to be, arguably some form of matte plastic. Within the base color options over here, we can just adjust this down, and then you've got a grayscale, but a grey matte type of plastic as such, and that there would be more than adequate for our needs, and it would work fine. And I think that's probably ready to export, really. If for whatever reason we wished for our keys to be slightly different, in terms of you want them to be a completely different material, then all you would do is just add a black mask to that particular material or a folder. So let's assume for whatever reason I wanted all my keys to be brass, yet I wanted the base to be plastic matte. So all I'll do is I'll just put a brass pure shader on there. So I'll add it above it, not inside of it. So you can just switch these off, just like using Photoshop. So I'm going to press Ctrl G and make a group from here, and I'm going to call this keys. And then I'm going to add a black mask here. So right click, add black mask. So whatever I add inside of this will essentially mask off and only be on the keys. So for now, if I suddenly use the brush, you can see now you're manually brushing in the material as such. Yeah. So I'll just undo that a step. What we can do is we can use a slightly different approach. So we can just essentially select it by polygon fill, and then we can say select by mesh fill, and then if we just go to like a side view, we should be able to ask orthographic view. You should just be able to do a quick drag select like so, and then lo and behold, just go back into perspective mode. And then just click off it, just press paint button over here, and now you can see we've just got a separate material applied to that in relation to that base material. If for whatever reason we didn't want that, just press delete. So the reason why I've made an actual folder is now if I delete the actual, or the brass pure, well, in fact I won't delete it, I'll just leave it there. So whatever I add inside of this will essentially just be applied to that mask section, like so. So there's lots and lots of opportunities to play around with materials over here. If you wanted to make a brand new material from scratch, I would advise you as a designer to just concentrate on using some of the basic materials over here. Probably no great reason why you need to go away and create your own from scratch. So you can just add a fill layer, and this will control the color, like so. And then you've got options within here to control specularity and the reflective values. So the roughness value, that's going to be essentially be matte, and that's going to be mega shiny. So just be reasonable with this in terms of what you want it to look like. So matte black plastic, that doesn't look too bad. Probably the color needs to be slightly darker. And then it's not metallic. So what you don't want to be doing is, if it's not metallic, do not adjust this. Otherwise what's going to happen is it's going to end up looking like a metal object, metallic object, which is not what you want. So to prove that point, I'm just going to delete that matte black plastic. I can see here the metallic color set to black. If you set it to white, it's now going to look like it's metal, which it isn't. I know it looks cool, but it's not the way to approach things. Otherwise, when you put it into Unreal Engine 4, it's going to look like a giant lump of metal, which is not what you want. So let's just go back and make our own material again. So just add a fill layer. Change the color to whatever you want it to be. Relatively darkish. It doesn't need a norm map, so you can actually just get rid of that. And the metallic color, again, you don't want it on there, you just want to leave it on the black slider, and then you can just control the roughness value to however rough you want it to be. That would do the job nicely. That looks like matte black to me. If for whatever reason you wanted to put some additional variation of roughness on there, and I would advise you to do this, then all you need to do is right click on it, pick a form of grungy texture almost, and then you can see what's going to happen there. It's going to apply that on there. Then you can control this further by just adjusting the histogram values on here. So what I would do is probably do something on these lines, and then you can control the roughness again further by just clicking on the roughness, and then you can adjust that again. So you want to be really, really subtle with this. That's the key. If you press tab, that will allow you to go into full screen. So you can see now we're just being very, very, very subtle with it. There's no need to go wild. Just to add a bit of variation to that actual material. That's all you're interested in doing. And then you can always just press shift and adjust the controllers, the HDRI, to find out what it looks like. So don't spend forever doing this, because ultimately you've got lots and lots of assets to do. But you can play around with this and produce all kinds of weird and wonderful effects here. So you want some form of noise on there, so you can always just type in here noise, and then there's some scratches. There you've got white noise. White noise is a good one because that's more likely to be found on plastic. You can see there what's going on there. So now if you adjust the roughness again, you can see clearly what's going on. So as I said previously, you want to be very subtle with this. Just to give it that rough indication that it's plastic. There we are, that'll do us. Maybe the colour would need adjusting somewhat. And then just press. So once you're happy with it, it's simply a matter of exporting it. Export process is very straightforward. What you need to do, once you're happy with it, obviously save this as well. I'm going to save this, pop it into our My Projects folder. I'm just going to make a new folder within here. I'll just call it Painter. I'll just call it Keyboard. So once you're happy with it, we just need to export it out into UE4. So the way to approach this is you're going to go to File, Export Textures, and we're going to create a channel packed texture. So it already has a pre-existing configuration for that. You just need to go to the config file over here, and you should have one which is UE4. Unreal Engine Channel 4, Unreal Engine 4 packed. So click on that. No need to worry about the configuration. You just need to make sure your configuration is set to Unreal Engine 4. PNG is absolutely fine. 2048 for this is overkill. For an asset of this size, bearing in mind it's just a small thing on screen, 512 by 512 is more than enough. Arguably you could probably go less than that, 256, but we'll leave it 512 by 512 for the time being. You export this, tell it where you want to export. I'll pop it into our desktop again. I'll literally put it into the same place as what we had before. Painter. I'm just going to select folder there, and this should just say export and only take a few seconds. So if we just open that folder now, we'll see what's going on. Just get rid of that. So it's essentially going to create 3 textures for us. This one here is going to be the base color, this one will be our normal, and this is the channel pack texture, which is going to contain the occlusion, roughness and metallic detail. So these 3 textures in conjunction with the FBX for this would need to be put into Unreal Engine 4, and that will be the basis of our very next tutorial. So once you have Unreal Engine to the point where you're at the main menu over here, you just need to make sure that you are using Unreal Engine 4.16.3. Do not use any of the later versions. The reason being is because the Athena Labs currently use this particular version, 4.16.3. As such, if you use a later version, then you will not be able to open the files up in the older version if you're using a newer version. Potentially, sometimes it can open them, but it can cause issues. So your best bet is just make sure you are using 4.16.3. So just launch that. I'll just have to give it a few moments to do its thing. What you'll need to do is decide upon an existing template. That could be a first person or a third person. I'm just going to click on New Project. So for the purpose of this, I'm just going to use first person. Create project. Give it a few moments to do its thing. And once it loads up, you should have something along these lines. I will provide links with regards to the basics of using Unreal Engine. For the purpose of this module, we will be keeping things relatively simplified. The purpose of the module really is to get you to the point where you can create assets in 3D, you can texture them, you can pop them into UE4, move them around, manipulate them, add textures, special effects and lighting, and that's adequate enough. Obviously, from a game design perspective, you do need to learn UE4 for the purpose of implementing actual gameplay, but we won't be implementing any gameplay within this module. So this is the first person setup at the moment. We need to import our assets. Obviously, with the Unreal Engine 4, there is so much to learn, very similar to Maya, lots to learn in Maya, lots to learn in Substance Painter, and certainly lots to learn in UE4. We'll try and get to the point where you are relatively okay with all 3 softwares. You don't necessarily need to know the advanced options at the moment. Keep things nice and basic, and I think you'll be right as rain. So let's bring in our assets. So in here we have an option called Import. Just click on Import. I'm just going to go to our My Projects file. So there's a few things we need to import. Firstly, the FBX for the keyboard. So make sure you bring that in. That's the actual mesh file. So I'm just going to click on open. I'm going to agree with the defaults. And if we just have a look at this, if I double click on this, if I just press F to frame, we can see that's our base. And we also have, unfortunately my screen is huge, so let me get this right. Oh yeah. So now that we've got that in there, if I double click on the content browser, which is what this is where we will see all our assets that we have created and imported in. This is a content browser. We can now see that this is our keyboard. It looks like it's got the correct material on there, but it hasn't. We need to update that with the correct textures shortly. And we also have our keys on the keyboard. So I'm going to press F to frame in, and you can see our keys. So if I was to now just grab these two and just push them into here, just press F to frame, and now you can see that we have our completed keyboard in the actual game world. It's currently sat on the floor. So what we do need to do is, just to make our life a bit easier, we might as well group this. So just select the two objects, very similar to Maya. Just press Shift to select, and I'm just going to press Ctrl G, and that will just group them. So now when I select one, you can just manipulate them and move them as the case may be. So there's our most amazing keyboard. We need to update and import our textures. So next we just go to import. I'm going to go to wherever I exported my textures. So don't forget it was these three particular assets. I mean, at this point we probably should rename these into something applicable really. So I'm going to use key underscore KB, the keyboard. Well, in fact I probably shouldn't even do that really. Let's just keep it nice and simple. Keyboard underscore base color, which I'm going to use. I'll use the albedo. So ALB. Albedo is essentially a type of texture. So in this case, it's just a flat colored texture. So ALB is perfectly fine. So we have KB underscore albedo. I'm going to rename this, press F2. KB underscore N, which is my normal map. I might as well put that in there. KB underscore norm for normal map. And this we have our channel pack texture. So in this instance, I'm just going to press F2 and KB underscore I could just use RGB and then just open those and bring those in. So this will give us three textures, and there's going to be our material, and we'll just use this as a basis for our actual keyboard material. You can just double click on that. Just have to rename this at some point. So here's our material. This is where I'm just going to zoom out a touch. Okay, I've got a large screen, so I've got to try and worry about how to fit all this in. So right click will just pan this around. So we need to import our textures into here, but before we do that, we need to change some settings on one of our textures. So this particular texture over here, our channel pack texture, double click on that, and then in here we have sRGB, and we need to ensure that this is turned off. Once that is turned off, just hit save. And at this point we might as well just save all really. Click on save all. So that's everything saved. If you see an asterisk on there, it means a change has taken place or it needs saving. So that's okay. We just need to change that one, which we have done so. Double click on our material. I'm just going to manipulate this around. There we are. Just going to delete that one. We don't need that one anymore. And we are just going to select our three materials and just drag them in, like so. What I'll do is I'll just make this larger. Let's just zoom in a touch. Just separate these off. The next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that in our channel pack texture this is set to linear color, which it is, so there's no problems there. We just triple check just in case. So let's now assign these particular materials. So this is our albedo, KB underscore albedo. Albedo needs to go into base color. This is our normal map, and this needs to go into our normal map channel. And we have 3 textures within the RGB channel over here. So if you can't remember which goes into where, you simply need to just put the mouse. Well, in fact, I've just forgot. I've just changed that now. Oh, darn it! What I'm going to have to do here is remember it. So I believe the red is our ambient occlusion. Our green is our roughness, and our blue is our metallic. Because I changed it, obviously it no longer told me what was what. If you don't change the name, then it should have keyboard underscore ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic. So that's generally an indication of RGB, which one goes where. So that one looks like it's correct there. So you can see, you can just make out some of the values on top of there. That would essentially be our keyboard material. So let's just save that. We will need to apply it. Well, then this, to be fair, we don't need to apply it because it was already applied, but let's see. So all I've done is I've just made sure that this here has the current keyboard 1 texture on there, which it does do so. So to go into full screen, you just need to press F11, and then that way you can just use the Windows or the PC Gamer WASD just to walk around your asset as such. If it's moving too quickly, you can just adjust the speed in here, camera speed, put that to 2, and then it would just be a lot slower. You could even put that to 1, just have a look at your asset. So if it looks really strange at the moment, that's because our lighting hasn't been built. So hence the reason why there's bizarre, weird and wonderful shadows everywhere. So we just need to do a quick lighting build on that. So I'm just going to press F11 again. And I'm just going to click on build. I'm going to make sure my lighting quality is set to production. And I'm just going to press build now. What that will do is create some nice shadows for us and get rid of some of the artifacts that we can see on the actual mesh itself. I'm just going to pause it because this can take a while as well. And now the lighting's been built. Just going to press F11 again. And you can see that's removed some of those, all of those artifacts. So there we have it, the world's most complex and amazing keyboard, randomly placed within an open world. Amazing. Regardless, the general premise is you are looking to create assets which have some form of obvious functionality in terms of visuals, rather than stereotypical game designer making cubes and spheres and cylinders, and that sphere happens to be a gargoyle, or the cube happens to be a tank, something else. Just by putting in some additional detail, we are going to try and create things which are far more realistic. So that is more than functional for our needs. If you really want to have a look at it at a greater level, then just scale it up. Just press R and obviously scale the damn thing up. I'm going to change the camera speed to 3. I'm going to press W, just move that up. Let that sit on there. And then I'm just going to press Alt and P. And that will allow me to play and see the world's greatest keyboard. And the world's largest keyboard as well, come to think about it. So, our ICA is going to stipulate creating like a retro games room, or not necessarily retro games room, but a dream games room. So one of the assets you might have in there is, if you are a PC gamer, you might think, well, you'd like a super duper PC in there that currently got a game running or something along those lines. So there we are. We'd have a keyboard that would fit that, and the idea is it would make lots and lots of assets of similar quality in terms of visuals, and we'll walk around our asset, our room should I say, and it will all look amazing and uber awesome. So as I stated previously, there is a lot to learn. Obviously, within this one tutorial, we've literally barely touched the surface in terms of implementing assets, textures, etc., and utilizing UE4 correctly. So this is something that it will take the full 12 weeks to get to grips with all of this. So don't be concerned or worried that things are taking slightly longer than you anticipated. That is entirely understandable. The purpose of the lab sessions will be to give you guidance, help, feedback, and support. So it's vital that you do turn up to obviously receive all that guidance. Okay. I will make some additional tutorials, but the basic principle is always going to be a simple model within Maya. We're going to create something which is relatively realistic in terms of if it will have beveled edges rather than really awful 90-degree angles. So we're going to avoid simple primitives. So we're going to model something. We're going to export that. We're going to create textures and materials in Substance Painter. We're going to export all of those assets and put them directly within an engine, and then get to see our wonderful creation directly within a professional engine.